Hi, it's Paul Banis, GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis at GreatDad.com here again with my weekly series talking to modern fathers. And I've got a guest today that I think is a little different take. I mean, I guess every show we say that it's a different take as I try to be as diverse as I can in terms of our subject matter. But I've got Doug Katz with me to talk a little bit about cooking with kids, the importance of cooking with your children. So welcome, Doug.
How are you?
Good, good. I was excited to see you've got a product, and we're not going to get too deep in the product because I haven't actually seen it, but it's a product for the disabled, because you yourself are a vet and you know about the disabled, and you've created this product for disabled vets or disabled anybody who's got some difficulty with their hands. But I think some of that learning along the way came from your experience with your kids too. I think it sounds like there's
Well, you know
an
what?
intersection there.
It's interesting because we've sort of pivoted from a disabled product to an adaptive product because
No,
I think
yes, okay.
adaptive. Well, and we started out with more thinking in terms of disability, but early on, we were trying to figure out how do you define the market,
Mm-hmm.
and what we determined was disability isn't binary. It
Mm-hmm.
it is defined by your ability to accomplish a task or do certain things. So it could be limited to a certain narrow focus of tasks or broader, but it's really defined no matter what that inability is from, and it could be being a kid because kids are
Yeah, right.
not as intellectually developed, but also they lack the strength, coordination, and dexterity to use many of the tools that an adult would. And in our journey, when I first invented the knife, it was for people with upper extremity issues. But when you talk to investors and other people, they say too small a market.
Yeah.
And that allowed us to branch this out to children because, harkening back to my Army time, the Army looks at a task with task, condition, and standards, right? Can you do that task, the condition and standards as defined by, in that point, it was the Army, that manual, whatever you're looking
Right.
at. But in the kitchen, cutting a carrot, there's safety, there's everything, right? There's this ability to cut a task, a carrot to a certain size or whatever. And it doesn't matter if you have MS or you're 8 years old, you may have similar issues, right? I have some osteoarthritis. My grip is probably more like a 10-year-old than it is to an adult. So what we focused on was, we really call it symptomatic manifestation, sort of that intersection of where people have similar strength, dexterity, and coordination issues. And it becomes sort of a Venn diagram. And at some point, we were like, well, wait a minute. Kids, by definition, can't do those tasks. So adaptive thinking really helps everybody because you're adapting what would be a normal knife to a child, or using it in that use case to then connect them better with being able to cook. So while we don't say it's a safe knife to give to kids, what we say it's safer than a straight knife. And you and I were talking in kind of the green room before, and it was very interesting on our journey because we talked to a lot of disabled advocacy groups. And at one point, someone said to us, this would be great for vision impaired people. We were like, vision impaired people? Like, that's a nightmare from a liability perspective, kind of similar to what we're talking about with kids. But
Right.
what he talked about was control and the transfer force, everything allowing you to cut and know where that blade is in a much safer manner because
Mhm.
your wrist has play in it. If you're using a straight knife, a little bit of play you may lose a tip of your finger. I think we've all done that. With the Nulu,
Luckily, I still got all mine.
yeah, I don't think I have any cuts right now because I've been using the Nulu actually. But what we realize then is that same safety argument. If somebody using it was vision impaired and they can use it safely, then kids under supervision represent another group that we're engaging. A little more work to do on how to message that, because you always want to make sure that safety is paramount with kids.
Right.
However, you also want to introduce them as quickly as possible into connection with their food, their nutrition, their diet, good ingredients, and having we talk a lot at Nulu about independence, and older Americans, or anybody, I guess it could be worldwide, keep the independence that they need to be able to prepare their own food. Why not bring kids along a little earlier to have independence and be able to manage their own food to some degree, or take part in it so that a meal is truly a shared thing from beginning to end?
Yeah, well, I think you've talked about two really important issues there. One is reduction of risk, not elimination of risk, and that's so
Right.
important when you're raising kids. It's like you're always trying to introduce them to some degree of risk, but of course
Yeah,
you don't
that's a
want them
great
to cut
point.
off a finger or get lost in the woods and all the bad things that could really
Right.
really happen to them. But risk is important, right? I mean,
Right.
that's I think we know that as parents. But the other thing was adaptive thinking, and I think that is one of the most basic skills that dads need to develop, right? Is to
Right.
see like what's appropriate for a 2-year-old is not the same thing that's appropriate at 5, and
Right.
how you judge that along the way. Can you have the experiences for your 3 kids? You've got an older girl and
I
2
always
slightly
tried
younger
to bring my
sons.
kids into cooking,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't deliberately design the knife around kids. But my kids, and again, I think my oldest, I think, God, that's terrible. My oldest is 15. I'm at that point now where I'm like, how old? Okay, what's a birthday? But so they're watching them use it. I think was sort of that some of that trigger, right? My kids did use it, and I've had it for about 2 years, so they were younger when playing around with it a little bit. Um, but I definitely have involved my kids in cooking. If you go to my site, actually, and my daughter's 22, but we've cooked together for a long time. So we've even made some videos and promotion of the knife with that. So it's really been forefront to me. I think that diet is so important in everything that we do always try and include them.
When did you
It's
start cooking with them? How old were you? Can you remember
not
when
with
they were
my
first
daughter. I mean,
stepped up to the
we did the
counter?
normal things, right? Like making cookies and doing all that kind of stuff. And I wish I had actually started earlier with more of the difficult things, right? Like
Yeah.
it's one thing if they're helping, it's a little more fun when they're old, when they understand flavor. So for me, it's a little uncharted territory because the invention came about past my kids. And the synaptic connection of, oh, this is this market. This is where it could potentially create a whole population of young adults who were more connected with their food as younger children. So for me, I'm hoping to empower parents who are younger, who have younger kids. I was going to say my age, but I've got some friends my age who are starting over with infants, which are crazy. Um, but people with younger kids, hopefully being able to pull them into the fold a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how that developed. Did you have it sounds like you were like I was. I mean, I didn't have any real plan, and I think I also have that same regret is that the kids started very early cooking cookies, but I could have put them on other simple dinner time tasks like chopping vegetables or something at a lot of
Right,
earlier age or
right,
mixing mashed potato, a variety of things adaptive to their age, which in turn the experts say the more that you get your kids involved with picking growing the plants or picking
right.
the vegetables at the grocery store or actually or cooking them together, the more tendency that they're going to have to eat healthier things or the things that you want them to eat.
Right. And I think doing tasks like that also, and I've got no empirical data, but it gets them better at doing tasks like that, right? They're
Mm.
sponges at that point, and their minds and bodies are connecting with what they're doing. So the sooner that you can get them into doing those things, I think the better.
Yeah, and the thing that I think all parents learn a little bit too late is that there's that brief window between, 3 or 4 and 11, 12, where they, like you say, they're sponges and they do whatever you want. So that
Right.
is the time to get them into these habits of, like, it's dinner time, prep time. It's not go watch TV for an hour or play on your phone for an hour.
Right.
It's dinner
Right.
time, prep time, and everybody's going to take a role. And if you're doing that at 7, a lot easier to continue that into the teen years rather than springing them on on them
Well,
at 12, where they say, "What? I'm losing my screen time to help do dinner?
yeah,
Are you
right. You want
nuts?"
it to be an activity and not a punishment. And
Right,
frankly,
right, right. Exactly. So good. Yeah.
it was tough with my oldest son, my middle child. And now he likes it. Like, for him, he came to it later, and it was through fitness and wanting to not
Mm,
eat terrible food,
yeah.
and really control his diet and have a heavy training diet kind of thing. Um, and I do wish that there had been sort of more of that early on, because he was sort of a story in transformation. In his middle of high school years, he transformed. If we had been able to sort of bring him in earlier, would that have had a difference? I don't know, but I think it always helps.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know our son did a little bit of the holiday cooking and stuff, but it wasn't until he got kind of into high school where he realized that if he invited a girl over for for dinner and he could make her the dinner, I mean,
Oh yeah.
that was like like, oh wow, I really can set myself apart here from the rest of the crowd if I'm inviting a girl over to prepare dinner for her. And then he started wanting all kinds of tips. I actually acted as a sous chef one, out of the scenes, but helped
Yeah,
him prep the food and
you
let
got to
him
make
do
sure
all
he
the.
makes that good impression, right? You never
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
But the other thing is, it creates efficiency too. So the prep part doesn't necessarily have to be so onerous. We've been playing around with some of the, what type of time does it save in the kitchen, right? Because there's benefits in just being able to use it, but because it replaces a bunch of knives, there's a productivity gain. And I think when you've got short attention spans, if you can get a lot done in more time, then it's all the better. The other thing that's really unique, and we haven't really seen how it's played out yet with kids, is the knife itself. We played with the name a little bit, like, how do you Nulu? Because it is a knife that really adapts to the person. So I think a unique thing about it is, and this is in the adult segment, but there should be no reason in the kid segment it's any different. It can be used safely, or more safe than a regular knife, I should say, in a way that works for that particular individual.
Yeah.
So, and there's a ton of video out there. I know, that it's a little bit hard to demonstrate in a podcast, but I've got my demonstration YouTube page and all that kind of stuff. So, if I could get you some links so people could see it. But ultimately, because it doesn't have, like, with a linear knife, there is a specific way to use it. Chefs take years to figure it out, and it's really inefficient tool, right? To use a knife the right way. And I actually have one down here. This is not a kitchen knife. It's a gift I'm making for somebody. But a chef will hold a knife like this,
Right.
or they'll tell you that this is for balance and this is to get better force transfer. I don't know the kid that's going to be able to do this,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and then different things you cut are going to be based on different kind of gripping. With the Nulu, because the way it's designed is with a circular geometry, you and I might use it completely different. And I think as long as you're watching the person using it, and if it's a kid, all the better, they may find a way that works best for them. And I think some of that comes down to problem solving. It creates a mechanism where they're like, okay, what works for me? How does my body work with things? And they gain some of what they would out doing other activities to get in touch with their body and how it works.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What different cooking activities are good for different ages that they could try. I mean, even with a less risky knife, that's not something you want to have them doing at 5. But what are some of those activities that they can start out with, like maybe measuring a cup of flour,
Yeah, absolutely. But
sorting
and
the
ours is
vegetables.
more specifically in the cutting world. But what I would say is soft first, right?
Yeah,
So
good.
if you
Yeah,
have things that don't require a lot of force, it's going to make it inherently safer. They're going to be more successful. Like I wouldn't have them try and cut, a big fat carrot that's like the circumference of your thumb or bigger, because that's a lot of work.
right.
Um, but anything that is a little bit more forgiving is a good place to start. But I also think kids surprise you. So when they understand the dynamics of what they're doing, this ability to sort of increase and get quicker to the more difficult tasks, right? Because it's all building upon different things. So it's like anything else. If they learn with softer foods and they learn how it works and they learn it safely, then they could start moving on to more complex things. They could move on to more complex cutting because our knife allows you to chop, slice,
Yeah.
julienne, right? So there's a nice ability even with like say a softer type of thing that you're cutting.
Well, I'm thinking not in the cutting area, but just in general, because I think a lot of parents are, they there's two things. One is, are they going to be capable of doing this somewhat
Right,
autonomously, so I'm not like standing
right,
over them,
right,
and they
right.
can add value to the evening. But then they're also worried, like, is the child going to create such a mess doing this
Yes,
fast
right.
that makes dinner prep actually twice as hard, and everybody's
Yeah,
busy and tired, and
yeah. I think I think
you
so.
don't want something like this to become turn into an argument or a fight or a disappointment,
a
all
hundred
those bad
percent.
emotions. So how do you keep that joy in the kitchen
Yeah,
while
I
giving
think I
these?
think you got it right. I think that it's I wouldn't say that there's a hard fast way of doing things, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
ultimately you're going to know your kids, you're going to
yeah.
know your kids on that
Adaptive
day.
thinking, like you said, very good.
Right, right. So and even as my kids have gotten older, I think it's a question of communication with whatever age your child is to be able to say, well, what do you feel comfortable doing? What do you want to do to help? And
Mhm.
helping them understand the importance of all those tasks in creating a meal. Now, I'm not a recipe guy, so I'm more of a hey, let's figure out what based on the things that I have and the flavor profiles that I know that work together
Yeah, that's a great
to be
skill in
able to
itself.
figure things out.
Yeah.
But I do think from a recipe perspective with kids, it's a good place to start because you could find a recipe for their favorite food or their favorite meal and work into that and work things like measuring and cutting and all of that into that type of activity.
Yeah. What do you think of some of those kits that are out there that are like cookbooks specifically made for that purpose, or even these kits where they give you like child-sized pots and pans and little spoons and stuff like?
I
Does
think
that
it's
have a
good. I
value, or is that
think
just like,
Well, I think finding the right tools is key, right? It's
yeah,
anything. Me creating this knife was because I found the right tools, right? I make knives in my spare time, but I had the right tools to do it. So I think researching that does make a whole lot of sense so that they can understand weights and measures and all the different things that go into it. But, I think a lot of this, and I'm going to go to the AI place here, I think a lot of this is moving to more customized solutions right on the spot to be able to say, hey, I want to cook with my kid today. I got this in the closet. How
mm,
how can I approach it that way? And
oh,
I
that's a
think
good
it's
point.
I think it's a good way to do it. I'm using AI a lot right now myself for business planning and all that kind of stuff. And I don't see a reason that it can't apply to this type of activity. I think that, you know, people look at things like AI and they go, oh, well, if I'm writing a paper or an email,
Right.
instead of saying, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I want to cook with them for both of their favorite meals. Help me find a good recipe and figure out what tasks is
Oh,
are appropriate for these kids. Then you're really using it to be able to say, okay, I get it. And then, hey, what are the things that can go wrong? And I think it's a really good. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and someone said, "Hey, I love AI because it adds 400 IQ points overnight, like that." Well, this is the things where I think that there is an ability for parents to really figure out how to optimize that time in the right way to
yeah.
better enjoy it and again make more independent kids.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you're just getting into prompt engineering. Like it isn't just like find me a recipe for tonight. It's a longer description. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old. I want them to learn a task, and I want them to do something that isn't too messy. You add all those things in the prompt, and your prompt may be 2 paragraphs long, but then it comes up with something that is appropriate. But then the other thing is to overlay
Yeah.
your adaptive thinking, as you said, on top of that. What do my kids like? Do they, they hate spinach but love lima beans? I mean, it's all that kind of stuff that would.
Oh, absolutely. And on the prompt engineering, even if you're not good at that, you could just say, "Hey, I got kids this age, and I want to. What do you need to know to help to make
Yeah,
your kid plan?" And you can fill things in there. So,
yeah,
I think that it's almost more fun to synthesize the solutions yourself because as you start to do it, create these different experiences. I'm not even going to say recipes, but experiences. You'll get better at it. They'll get better at it. And if you have the right tools to facilitate it, all the better.
yeah. So you don't work much with recipes, because I'm trying to put together some of the family recipes and trying to organize all that. Do you have any experience of what people do nowadays, modern people
I
do with
don't.
recipes? Are recipes even a thing, or is it just AI creates
Again,
you a
for me,
recipe on your
it
spouse?
literally is because I'm a better cook than a shopper.
Yeah,
So a lot of times, like yesterday, I was sitting around and I was hungry. There wasn't a lot in the house, so I grab a piece of naan bread, cut some stuff up, and you make a pizza and you throw it in there, and that kind of thing. And even that, as we're talking here, right? Like that's something that goes in the oven in 2 seconds, right?
yeah,
You get I go to Aldi a lot, and they have these like flatbreads that you can just throw stuff on. But
sure.
there's a lot of cutting, there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of interaction of flavors, and there's no rules. So you can find some really good things, and that's where for me, I feel recipes are kind of constraining. I
Mm,
think for certain things, it's good to sort of work around what's worked. And I think for certain types of cooking, like I'm kind of more
baking,
inspired by
baking, you have to have proportions correct.
baking is science, right? I'm a
Yeah,
terrible baker.
yeah.
But also, certain interactions of wet and dry ingredients, even outside of baking, or just like knowing, hey, you can't turn something up twice the temperature in half the time and cook it right. Just little things. But it's for me, I'm more like a short order guy, right? Like I like to just sort of boom, 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 and come up with stuff, and I tend to find better outcomes. I'm not this, Julia Child, get into French cooking. It's just
Mhm.
not what I do. But I do think there's a lot to be learned from that. But I think what you could do if you're trying to take family recipes and turn it into a recipe. Again, I turn to the AI thing. Like, I have this recipe. What do you need to do to actually turn it into a recipe? And actually, I have to correct myself because one of the videos I put out there, I invented a chili recipe that it's funny. I eat kind of vegetarian most of the time. I really tried to cut back meat, but I call it vegan's nightmare. And it's it starts with bacon, and you do cubed steak and cubed pork butt and all this kind of stuff. And I realized people were asking about it, and when I made a video, I was like, okay, what can I do? And I did exactly what I just said to do. I put out all of the ingredients. I said, here's all the ingredients I have, and I sort of put just a rough paragraph in there. Hey, here's how I do it. Bam, it puts it out there for you. So the resources are there. I think it's just really grabbing them and using them in a way that mirrors with your objective.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just think cooking is one of those wonderful things that you're going to do it every day anyway for your family usually, unless you've got a partner who's got who's got that on their
Right.
task list and doesn't keeps you out of the kitchen. And it's such a great way to, especially when they're young, keep them. They're going to be in the kitchen usually with you anyway too when they're little, and it's a great thing that they can get into right away.
Well,
And as we say, that
right.
helps them learn what foods to eat and how they are part of the process. And it's a
And
great
it's so
skill.
much what we're about as human beings,
Sure. Is
where it's a required thing. It is a thing that if you don't eat, you die. But so is going to the bathroom, and we don't all hang out in the bathroom together. So there's something uniquely human about sharing a meal and having discussion over it and laughing and, even when it turns out terrible, having a family memory. I remember I had a friend over, my friend from second grade, so I've known the guy forever, and I was making pizza, and it turned out terrible. But that story will always be there, and I think that food is it's something to really celebrate, and preparation of it is
Yeah.
something to celebrate,
Yeah.
because I don't think ever there is no other time where you are, you're creating something that is nourishing to people, like literally nourishing to
Yeah.
people, and it's just such a great experience.
Yeah, it's sad when people look at it as drudgery because it's got all those elements, like you say, that's the communal, it's the artistic, it's the nourishing, it's the great part of parenting. In my mind, it's great. So let's talk maybe about the meal itself. Do you have any traditions in your household about the meals that you all try to sit down together as often as possible, or try once a day, or
Besides
any
the
of that kind of thing?
religious ones,
Yeah,
I'm so sorry to cut you off too. I'm like super ADD guy, late diagnosed, but super ADD. Um, lately, we have the holidays, all
yeah,
those things.
very
Uh,
important. I think no matter how cynical you are about anything about
oh yeah,
commercialization
oh
and
yeah,
everything, traditions, holidays are really important for kids.
absolutely. And I think it's good to start new ones. So
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
pizza
yeah,
guy. I love pizza,
yeah, yeah.
and I have created a couple of versions that I cook, but that's like Friday night. And instead of ordering in, and my dad lived with us for a couple of years. He passed away in actually late 2024, early 2025. He passed away on his birthday, December
Sorry,
31st, at
sorry.
89. He had a great run. But while he lived with us, every Friday, kind of everybody would be in the kitchen, and I would be cooking, and, people would be helping out. And I think that really became a tradition that we're carrying on as much as we can, right? If my son has a basketball game or something, we can't
Yeah,
get to
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But and for me and my, and it's one that is kind of dying out because my dad passed away. But for a couple of years, we would be hanging out in the kitchen. We would always have Guy Fieri on, because I would watch Dine-In, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and I learned a lot of technique from that. I got
yeah,
to say, that's where I
yeah,
learned a lot of like just technique, and I think that played a little bit into the Nulu because you can work on a flat top grill and all kinds of stuff. But we would always hang out and talk, and it became sort of a tradition, not around the food. I don't think there's as many traditional foods. My chili is starting to play into a couple of them, but because I don't really have recipes, it's kind of like, all right,
yeah,
well, what can I put together today? Um, but I probably should be creating some degree of connection around that, right? I think that's every time I hear parents talk, and I'm one of them, we'd love to sit down more and have meals together, and we would
yeah,
love to do certain things. And I think if you can anchor that around a particular meal, taco night, pizza night, whatever, I think that that does help to create those traditions. I just haven't been as good as most people are.
yeah. Well, I think we're all not as good as all this stuff as we think that most people are. But the important thing is to keep that kind of top of mind at the tradition. There are other kind of traditions, but the mealtime is one that seems to come naturally because you're probably going to do it, and it's you know, if you allow it to happen where, your son has dinner at 6 and you have dinner at
Right.
7 and your daughter is good, that just becomes crazy time and everybody feels
Right.
disjunction as a family. People feel like they're short order cooks and not adding any value. There's no real joy in it. That's, I think, the thing that we all have to kind of avoid, even if
Well, and
cooking
I
is
think
totally
I
your
think you
thing.
can pivot in what I was talking about with my dad. There's no reason that people can't say a particular night is going to be the night that the
Yeah, we
kids
really make an
help
effort. Yeah.
they help pick what that's going to be. And I
Yeah.
know I've seen some people doing similar things where it's like, hey, you're going to figure out what you need for that meal, and the kids are going to help prepare it to the extent that they can and do all that. I think that you can build traditions that are not recipe driven,
Mhm.
and create that experience where, again, it's not just about the meal, it is about family, and it is about them getting the chance to be the one that's providing the nourishment to everybody else.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice
But
as
they don't
well.
they don't get to drink the wine when they prepare it the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't let them do that either. Well, now mine are 2024, so they're
Right.
pretty close to doing that as well.
Right.
All right. Well, Doug, thanks a lot for taking some time to talk about this.
Oh, I
I love
thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
I love cooking, and I appreciate your efforts to make sure that that part is accessible to people who are disabled, who maybe would have given up that task. And I'm sorry I don't have the knife, or we could have talked about that more. But I think people can find you online, both.
Absolutely. I've got a huge digital footprint, so they
Yeah.
can always find me.
Is it at Nulu.com?
NuluKnives.com
Yeah.
is our main website. The Kickstarter ended in December, but it will stay up, I think, past fulfillment. We're fulfilling it in mid-March. We'll be ready to take orders April, May timeframe on a consistent basis, as long as we don't have any supply chain issues. Who knows, right? But or they could look for me. If they do a Google search on me, I guarantee they're going to find some connection to Nulu.
All right.
And if anyone has any questions, they can always reach out to me directly. I would love to pontificate on cooking or the Nulu.
Okay, great. Okay, Paul Baines with GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching services at GreatDad.com/go, including my free course on gratitude, which you can get as a listener to the podcast. Okay, until next time, stay strong.